Hi, I'm Leon Gorin, CEO of PO Leadership, and welcome to the Way Forward, PO Leadership's live webcast series. If you're joining us for the first time and you're a CEO, president, business owner, and/or a corporate executive looking to grow your leadership capabilities and performance, and of course, grow your business, you've landed in the right spot. In this rapidly changing business landscape, the importance of expanding your connections and having insightful and meaningful conversations with the right peers is now more important than ever. At PO Leadership, our members include some of Canada's strongest leaders, representing almost every industry. They lead both Canadian SMEs and large multinational organizations. Our leaders understand the value and importance of being able to connect and think with each other as they all work to successfully achieve their personal goals and those of their organization. If you're thinking about the future of your business and navigating through the many unknowns that lie ahead, if you're thinking about your stakeholders and your employees and how you'll continue to engage, inspire them, and support them, or if you're thinking about whether and how you should pivot your business and understand the importance of being able to step outside of your building to learn from others, then I urge you to visit our website at po-leadership.com and set up a time to speak with us. We're here to help you, your family, your organization, and we've recently created an opportunity to get you involved through some type of trial membership. This morning, we're very excited to welcome Ron Tite. Ron is the founder and CEO of Church+State, a content marketing agency based in Toronto. His work has been recognized by the London International Advertising Awards, the New York Festivals of Advertising, and the list goes on from there. He was named one of the top creative Canadians by Marketing Magazine. And in 2019, he launched his second book, Think, Do, Say, Building Personal and Organizational Momentum in a Busy, Busy World. And I think many of you will have heard him speak at our conference in 2019. Now, before I pass the mic to Ron, this is how we envision the hour unfolding. Ron's going to lead off with his presentation, which should take about 20, maybe 25 minutes. We have a 30-second little break there that you'll learn about, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. I'd ask that you please post your questions in the group chat, and when ready, we'll reach out to you and ask you to come off mute so you're the one asking the question. So let's get started. Morning, Ron, and thank you for joining us today. Here's the mic.
Thanks. I feel like I should grab the mic from you or something. Thanks, Leon. And hey, everybody. Nice to see everybody again for those who were at the event in Toronto down at Hotel X. Hotel X? Yeah. And lovely to see you all here, happy and healthy and safe in this Zoom environment. I know it can be a little bit hectic. Beyond that door right now, you have no idea of the chaos that is going on in my house because my wife and I had our second child on Friday, March 13th, 2 days after the pandemic was declared. So if you want to experience a different type of lockdown, you're more than welcome to tune into our live YouTube show called The Newborn and a 2-Year-Old in a Lockdown Environment. It's really fun. And so just that alone is why I'm just really happy to be here. Could we do this as an 8-hour session and not just be here? No? Okay. So that's been kind of what it's been like on the personal side. But we're all going through our own stuff, obviously. And we're going through it at home and we're going through it at work. Now, I've been doing a fair number of virtual keynotes for people. And beforehand, what I'll do is either a couple of days before or in the session, I'll ask people, what has been your biggest leadership challenge over the past 8 weeks? What has it been? And in the chat, I've included a link to the Survey Monkey so that if you want to go and tell me yours, you can do that. I don't need anything too elaborate, just a simple statement. This has been my biggest leadership challenge to date. Now, I thought I would start by sharing this data with you, given the position that many of you are in. So I've kind of, phrased this time as something called the coup, that we really need to experience the coup in a couple of different ways. And one of the first examples, one of the first leadership challenges that people have, number one on the list, is that people want, they kind of say that their bosses suck. That's the number one leadership challenge. My boss sucks. Communication from senior management is the biggest leadership challenge that people have had over the last 8 weeks. They're not getting the information they need. It's not transparent enough. They don't know what's going on. That is the #1 leadership challenge. To the point that one person's comment was, "My boss is a COVIDiot." And I hope that wasn't somebody from my team. The second one, the second leadership challenge, #2, is what I call the great unknown. That people are saying, I don't know. My biggest challenge is I don't know how to plan. I don't know how to forecast. I don't know how to motivate and inspire. I don't know how to do anything in my job because there's so much that is unknown. And they're looking at, organizational structure. We're not exactly sure what's going to happen. They're looking at the government restrictions of what's going to happen there. They're looking at the economy. People's concern, we got some consumer data the other day, and that people's concern for the general Canadian economy is more concerning to them than their own personal financial situation. So this great unknown is really weighing on people and is a big leadership challenge. And one of the lines I love is this, that somebody responded, this is their quote, not mine, but managing the desire for certainty with our inability to provide any. Because we all know that this is what our teams want. They want certainty. But at this stage, we can't really provide any of it. That is a massive challenge for people. Now, #3 on the list is that people, the challenges around engagement. And I don't mean getting engaged and booking a hall and then getting the deposit back because you're never going to have the wedding kind of thing. I mean, engaging your teams in the business and with the team when there are so many other things that, quite frankly, are more important in their lives right now. So #1 was my boss sucks. #2 was the great unknown. And #3 was keeping my team engaged. Those are the top 3 challenges. Now, if we look at the data and we look at what are some of the other ones, we've got emotionally supporting my team. We've got the work-life balance. We've got connecting and really forming a connection with my team. We've got leaders going, how the hell do I motivate myself so I can lead from example? And then the 8th one was like, how do I provide safety for my teams when we get back to work? And when is that? What's really interesting here is that this is the data. This is the data on all those top 8. That #1, communication from above, is only 15%. #1. So that leads me to believe, as you can probably guess by this, that there are many more than just the top 8 that I've shared. So on one hand, we say we're all in this together, but I don't know that we are. Because we'll be in it together, but we're not experiencing it together. We're experiencing completely different things, and people on our team are experiencing completely different things. And I think that in itself is a massive leadership challenge. Now, how do we move ahead? Well, there's something interesting here that I think is an interesting metaphor that we can use to talk to our teams about getting back to business. And I don't mean getting back to business the way the politicians are phrasing it, because we do have to get back to business at some point. And it's this: I'm a horrible driver. I failed my license when I was 16. That's how great I am as a driver. So I don't really know a heck of a lot about professional car racing, but here's what I do know. I know that in the straightaway, it's really easy to just gun it. And in the straightaway, often it's the product development that happened 8 months ago. It's the money in the car that can, who's got the fastest car in the straightaway. But in the corners, this is where the race is won. The race is won in the corners because now we get the skill of the driver. Now, when a race car driver goes into a corner coming out of a straightaway, the first thing they need to do is they need to slow the car down. And the reason they need to slow the car down is because they need to get control of the car. They need the car to be as stable as possible when they're in the corner. Now, amateur drivers like me, we go, okay, you do that, you slow down, you gear down, and then when you come out of the corner, then you put your foot on the gas. And that, of course, is not the way you win a race. That the professional race car drivers know, you accelerate in the middle of the corner. We're in the middle of the corner. So once you've got the car stable, once you've read the instruments and you've got the data and you've got that feeling for the car being stable, once your people are using the phrase new normal, That means they're in somewhat of a routine, and you've now reached a stable environment. Now you need to gun it. And you need to accelerate to the point that you don't go back, that you don't go gas brake, gas brake, gas brake, because that's not great. That's not great strategic driving. But once you've reached stability, you start to accelerate so that when you do come out of the corner, whenever that is, you've got momentum. And you've got momentum. If you wait to come out of the corner, well, you're going to be lapped by everybody who started 100 paces ago. So we need to accelerate the car. And how do we do that? Well, we really need to tell our people, look, this line is from Jackie Stewart. The exit from the corner is more important than the entry. Welcome to the middle of the corner. For most of you, for most categories, you're in the middle of the corner. So let's go. Let's do this. So that to me is what we need here is this C to C leadership, which is going from a state of chaos to a state of composure. And how do we do that? Well, we actually do it by flipping it around. When you're in a state of chaos, you need to bring some composure, some stability. You need to slow it down. But once you've reached the state of composure, you need to introduce some chaos. So it actually goes back and forth. So you go from chaos to composure, from composure to chaos. And so that's why we need a coup. We need a coup because we need to introduce some chaos into our state of composure when we're in the middle of the corner. Now, historically, coups have been, and you may know how a political coup d'etat goes down. And in business, it's not dissimilar to that. And that traditionally, what I've referred to coups as is when insurgent forces topple the establishment, or at least eat into their margin and their market share. They topple the establishment by meeting the needs that the establishment ignored. The establishment gets fat and bloated and lazy, and they just stop listening to the people. And what you have is, by surprise, in the middle of the night, a coup occurs. Politically, we saw this. South of the border, that was not an election win. That was a coup of the establishment that the establishment did not see coming. We saw it in Toronto, the downtown elites, a coup of the downtown elites when Rob Ford came in. And again, those aren't political statements of support or not. I'm just saying that is an example of a political coup that has happened really recently. In business, coups occur in a very similar way. And we've seen this, Dollar Shave Glove. I talked about this when I was with you. This was a coup of the establishment because they met the needs of the masses by saying people don't want to pay $40 for razor blades, and they don't want to, have somebody unlock the blades at a Shoppers Drug Mart. So that's been a traditional coup, and more we're seeing this. Two quick examples. My friend Aaron Burry runs an organization called Willful, which has done a really efficient way to do will and estate planning that completely goes against the establishment. And just this week, my agency, Church+State, brought on a new startup client called Split Easy, which is really taking what Willful has done in the will space and doing it in the divorce space. And that why engage divorce attorneys in family court when you can do it in a much cheaper, much faster, much more progressive way. That is a complete coup of the establishment. The other way that we often talk about this is a pivot. Oh, we're going to pivot. And a pivot traditionally occurs because of one of two things. One, there is an unexpected expertise that develops from an organization that they didn't know that they had. So when Slack started, it was a gaming organization that said, oh, we're going to build this chat thing to help us out, and we're way better at this than we are at that. Let's explore that. Shopify started as a snowboard apparel and snowboard organization, which wasn't happy with the e-commerce platform that was being used to sell its products. So they built their own and then said, whoa, we're better at that than we are at that. We're going to pivot the organization. So that's the first way a pivot can occur. The second way a pivot can occur is when there is an unexpected market for something that you didn't realize. So YouTube, for example, started as a video dating site. And YouTube looked at this and saw, whoa, we can take the exact same platform, reposition it, because there's a significantly greater market for people who just want to share videos. So that's the way a traditional pivot has occurred. Now, an internal coup is something that's different from both of those. And an internal coup is really a conscious approach to look at your organization and say, okay, what can we do to change what we're currently doing to meet a problem that currently exists in the marketplace, or a problem that occurs within the walls of our organization? We're going to consciously make this move. So, and some of you are being forced into this. You're being forced. It's not it is unexpected, but it's not an unexpected expertise or an unexpected opportunity. It is something that was an unexpected force that occurred. And I'm sure you've seen this. Who led the digital transformation of your company? The CEO, the CTO, or COVID-19? Now, there's a couple of things that I think are going to really change this that are different from a traditional recession behavior that we've seen. So first of all, obviously there are weak links in the supply chain, and that is going to create problems as we get back to work. We can't flip a switch. There are going to be opportunities there. Can you perform an internal coup to meet that need? Secondly, the cleaning process that is going to occur, we've seen it. We work with a client in the hotel space, and the really, really strict cleaning process that is going to take place in organizations and events and people like hotels and airports. This is going to take some of your margin to a place you had not expected, that is going to have ramifications that maybe a greater part of their staff is going to be outsourced. So that is going to have an implication and provide opportunities. Aunt Linda, which is what I just call this idea that there is now a mass adoption of technologies that already existed. You may know the quote, the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. Guess what? It's evenly distributed now. We've forced it into it. There was a reason why when coups occurred over the past 5 to 10 years, why categories and businesses didn't go down, because there was enough of a market for people who still did things the old way. Yellow Pages, and I don't know what the numbers are now, but we worked with them a few years ago, and where they were still at about 70% of the revenue from the book. Why? Because there were still people using the book. And so we didn't have everybody go over into adopting the same technologies. We've got that now, and there are going to be implications. I had a Zoom call with my 80-year-old aunt a few days ago so she could meet our son. Now, the Not So Live from New York, of course, is in the event and getting together space, is going to have massive ramifications. And then habits around consumer habits. And consumer habits are changing, and we're not exactly sure. In a lot of ways, we can't predict these. So one of our clients is Walmart. And what's been really interesting in the apparel space is that if you sell, and this is a tiny, minor, insignificant habit, but one we would have never predicted, which is if you sell an outfit, you sell a top and a bottom, well, people are just buying the tops. No one's buying the bottoms because I'm naked down here. Aren't many of you are? Hey, it's the Friday of a long weekend. Of course, get your party on. Go naked underneath. So this is an insignificant little consumer offset or tangent that has come from the environment that everybody is in. And there are a lot of those that we need to dig into. So how do we deal with that? Well, the first thing we need to look at is, well, we're in this purpose pivot where we need to double down on our purpose and elevate our purpose beyond the thing that we currently do. I talked to you about this. This was the think part of the think, do, say. Now, again, a quick example. My wife and I got this charcuterie board from a place called Pasquale Brothers. Pasquale Brothers serves restaurants with great Italian fare, and at the heart of their purpose was empowering Italians to serve, or it's empowering restaurants and Italians. Hey, come on. My mother's maiden name is Bocchino, so this is why I go for the great Italian stuff. But they would serve restaurants. Well, now, if you can't serve restaurants, it's time to relook at your purpose, because your purpose isn't going to help you if it's baked in your customer base that no longer exists. So, of course, now it's not about empowering restaurants, but it's empowering people to enjoy the best that Italy has to offer. So you need to relook at your purpose. Then you need to look at and embrace the limitations that are on you. And a couple of fun examples here, but far too often we try and adapt And we don't embrace the limitations. We try and wiggle our way through using our old process and our old approach. One of the best scenes, action scenes, some of you may remember from Indiana Jones, where Harrison Ford was engaged in a fight with this sword dueling villain, and the streets were filled with people. On the page, this script was this part of the script was 3.5 pages. It was going to be a long, drawn-out battle of swords and everything else. And when it came down to the day of the shoot, Harrison Ford had diarrhea, and they couldn't do it. But they had, hundreds of extras. They had to shoot the scene. So you may remember from the movie, the villain does his sword thing, and Richard Gere just pulls out a gun and goes. Incredibly unexpected, a wonderful piece of cinema that only came because they embraced the limitations. A little closer to home, you may know the story of Canada's greatest comedy duo, debatable, but they're up there, Bob and Doug McKenzie. This was because the CRTC went into SCTV and said, in order to get government funding, you need more Canadian content. And the cast said, what? We're all Canadians, or most of us are Canadians. We're shooting this in Edmonton. What are you talking about? And so they embraced the limitations by saying, you want Canadian content? All right, we'll give you Canadian content. And they said, what's the most stereotypical Canadian content we could deliver? And out of that limitation came the gold that is Bob and Doug McKenzie. Now, I talked to you a little bit about this when we were together in Toronto. And while nobody has gone through this global pandemic before in our lifetimes, there are specific industries that have had their own COVID-19s. And in music, they've done that. And so we had the 4 members of the establishment. They got their COVID-19 was Napster, which completely cut out and changed the business. We had the 4 members of the establishment, the radio stations, the record stores, the labels, and the musicians. And then comes in, we give power to the people. There's chaos, of course. People say you don't have to listen to the man. The establishment starts getting cut out. A power vacuum occurs. A problem occurs where there's actually too much music available. New players emerge from this and say, we'll solve that problem. And then what's developed is a new establishment. But what's interesting is that the labels embrace their limitations. Some of the good labels embrace their limitations. They innovated enough to live through the chaos. They filled their own power vacuum and came out the other side, not only members of the new establishment, but more profitable than they ever were before their version of COVID-19 came in, because by embracing it, they no longer had warehouses. They no longer had to travel the world. They no longer had to print albums. So they were way more profitable by embracing their limitations. Now, very quickly here, in the last couple of minutes, I just want to walk you through a process that you can apply. And this is called Flex Your Pecs. And this is that we need to identify what the problem is. We need to explore what that is. We need to come up with creative solutions, and then we need to sell it internally or externally if we have a board of directors or people who will judge us, investors and whatnot. So around identifying the problem, what is the new problem that exists? And you need to take the mindset of a stand-up comedian who acts as an observer to the outside world and says, what's the deal with that? And they start to explore it. So what's the deal with this new thing that has emerged? Now, in the old days pre-pandemic, coups occurred over a long, slow, drawn-out period where a young upstart sees a problem, they want to solve it, they start to develop code, they get their Series A, their Series B, yada, yada, yada. It's a long, drawn-out process. Now, we're getting this data in real time where new problems are emerging. And it's a little trickier to identify what those are. And so you need to get as much information about the category and about your customer and their habits as possible. So you need to get this information coming from all sides. So what's the problem? Secondly, you need to explore it. And I can share these slides with you afterwards. You can just comment in the chat, and I'll do that. But So you need to explore what the problem. So like, why are people so frustrated? What are their emotions? How to reverse that emotions? Let's break down the process into bite-sized pieces. So hold on, they go from here, they go from here. Ah, this is the problem in this customer journey. This is where they're not satisfied. What's the biggest barrier to change? Like all these questions, you just explore it for the sake of exploring it. And then once you do that, then you need to apply some creativity to the solution that can solve that problem. So what if a child solved it? I mean, what if an engineer solved it? What if IKEA solved it, or Tesla or Starbucks? How would they apply their model to that? What if we merged with somebody? Who would be the least obvious merger? What if we were to buy out somebody? What if it was 1950? What would we do then? So you just need to push yourself. And one of when Jerry Seinfeld had his movie called Comedian, the trailer for this was him just kind of sitting there, kind of with a pen in his mouth. Someone calls him and they're like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm working." And then he just puts it down and just keeps thinking again. And that there is no shift F5 on this. And some of it's ugly and most of it not going to work. But you need to explore that creatively. Third choice is something that you can do where you say, look, our first choice is to do this, and force yourself. What's our second choice? What's our third choice? And then the last part here is hecklers. And here's what I mean by hecklers. At hecklers in stand-up, there's the passive heckler and the active heckler. And the active heckler is the person who goes, "You suck," and you engage with that person. But the passive heckler is the person who doesn't say anything. They don't even realize you're on stage. The passive heckler is the far more dangerous heckler. If you're trying to get alignment within your organization, you need to bring the passive hecklers on side who may not be saying something in your Zoom call, but are back channeling to people within the organization saying the idea sucks. So you need to get those people on side. Now, that is an approach for a coup, and we now can open up for questions. If you think any of this is BS, you want to challenge me on any of it, I would more than welcome it. But I think first, Leon, we have a little message.
At PEO Leadership, I'm surrounded by other business leaders who challenge me to become better.
Les Mandelbaum, founder and CEO of Umbra.
Leaders really need to step outside their world and get new perspectives.
PEO Leadership is more than peer-to-peer advisory. It's a community of top executives with global experience.
Our retail landscape is rapidly changing. PEO Leadership has been vital in helping us navigate through this.
The time to step up and lead is now. Go to peo-leadership.com.
I'm going to open up to questions here, but maybe I'll get us started because I know the questions will be coming up. So Ron, thank you so much for the process. I want to touch on, think about it from your perspective, because the creative piece is your third piece there, and you've been noted for your incredible creativity. And how do you start with yourself on the creative piece? So you got your team, but you gathered all the knowledge. A lot of us are trying to think creatively out of the box here as we sort of strategize. How do you yourself get engaged in coming up with all these creative ideas usually?
That third choice is an old improv comedy exercise. And within how that typically works is somebody is on stage and they say, this is my boyfriend, Charlie. And somebody in the audience yells out, "Second choice." And you go, "Oh, my boyfriend is Gloria," and you kind of explore that, and it forces you into a place of being uncomfortable. And so that's what you need to do. And however you need to do that. Now, I think there's a couple of things that I want to say about this. One is that there is no magical place where creativity happens. Everybody says like, "Oh, I need my special moment with my special music." No, that's an excuse. Get the work done, roll up the sleeves. Creativity is a job and it is work. So that's the first thing. Secondly, that you need to be comfortable that you might suck, that the idea sucks. And when I've worked with creative partners, the biggest barrier to great work is being comfortable with one another to go, "Yeah, that completely sucks, but what about this?" An interesting example of this is if I was to say to this group, "Tell me something you'd find in a kitchen." everybody, and I've done this exercise with executives and frontline workers, all levels, the number one choice that people say is fork. The second choice is a knife. The third choice is not spoon, it's butter. Fork, knife, butter. Top three choices of all time. Now, when I go to the group and say, what is the most memorable item from the list that everybody generated? Never in the history of doing this over 15 years has anybody ever said fork, knife, butter. So we need to realize that the first thoughts we have are not only the most logical, but they are the ones that other people have. They're the easiest, they're the safest, and they make us feel most comfortable because everybody is thinking that. So you need to go, okay, you need to write it down. This is my first choice, fork, that's it. Then force yourself. What's the next choice? And then force yourself again, what's the third choice? So that you consciously move into this uncomfortable zone. The last question I will ask myself is, what's the one thing that you would never do? You wouldn't do it. You would not do it. And you'd go, I'd buy IKEA, or what, like whatever, it's an M&A discussion, or I would call it this. And know that those ideas that you come up with aren't as crazy as you think they are. And secondly, that is the idea that makes them brilliant. There was an idea here that, you would never, ever, ever, ever put an F-bomb on the title of a book. You wouldn't do, who does that? And then we get the subtle art of not giving a beep, and there you go. So the thing that people would never do is often the thing which will lead you into a great coup.
That's great. Thanks, Ron, for that. I know people are working their minds here as they're thinking of questions, but as they're coming up, I'm going to shoot you one more question. It's all becoming, everything is shifted. Obviously, with all retailers are closed today, right? Or they're just starting to open. The consumer experience, what are you seeing in regards to, it's kind of the e-commerce piece, except it's accelerating, but building a relationship with the consumer online today and translating that into sales. Are you seeing any innovative, interesting ideas out there that some of the members could take?
Yeah, what's interesting, we had 2 weeks before the pandemic was declared, we sold through an idea with Century 21 in New York, their flagship store in Manhattan. And it was in partnership with Doug Stevens, Retail Profit. And what we were going to do is we were going to shoot a live show from the floor of the store. And the thinking there was that traffic is down. You've got these massive flagship stores that are beautiful, and that you're justifying the rent or the lease against the transactions of the store. What if you reimagine that space as being a studio, so that you can maybe bring in some marketing costs and to pay for rent? And I still think that this is something that really needs to happen. And here's why. People aren't going to want to go, immediately anyhow, and rub shoulders with people, kind of browsing in stores. They may not. And it's going to take more than a wonderful retail experience to get them to do that. Secondly, on the e-commerce side, we've built that up because the complexity of that model is the transaction and the fulfillment. Well, we're there, we've got that, but it is a transactional relationship. I look for this product, it's got this shot, I click to my cart, and then it gets delivered to me over the next couple of days. We've got that. It's the middle that's really missing, is how do we deliver an amazing online experience that goes beyond the click to buy, that brings in some of that thought leadership, the expertise, the curation that occurs in retail, and the community that occurs in retail into online. That has not occurred yet. And I think that stores are really going to be pushed. So we're going back out with that to say, this is something that stores need to do. Now, I will counter that slightly with what's interesting is Mark Cuban brought in paid for some research of mystery shoppers to go into stores in Texas to see how many stores were adhering to the strict regulations that were imposed by the government, and it was 97% were not, but the stores were filled. Now, I don't know if that is a reaction from people going, I'll put those fingers outside of the frame so you don't see them. To the establishment going, I'll shop if I want to shop, or if it's people going, I want to see people. And that's the part that I'm not exactly sure. We know that when you do something long enough, it becomes a habit. And so we're not exactly sure what we're currently doing is going to transition into being the new habit, but there are going to be some forms of that. Like, for example, I think I'm going to be doing much more of this even when airports are fully open.
That's great. Thanks, Ron. All right, we do have a question. Jason Price. Jason, you want to come off mute and go ahead and ask your question? If I have you here.
Is that better?
That's better. Welcome, Jason.
I guess from a macro perspective, I don't think there's any better place than to think about chaos and how large retail landlords are going to create chaos to deal with the upcoming change in the retail marketplace.
So the question, how would you create that chaos? Is that what you're asking, Jason?
Yeah, if I was a large retail landlord, whether it was in Canada or the US, and I owned Sherway and Square One and Vaughan Mills, and the stores are all empty, as a landlord, how am I going to create chaos and change the retail environment so that I have and can continue to have value in those properties?
It's a great question. And it's funny, I talked to Doug Stevens about this yesterday of like, what are the CFs of the world doing right now and how much breaks are they giving to retailers? And apparently, from Doug's perspective, it's that those are select conversations that are happening with specific retailers. And so what are they going to do? I think what they need to do is reimagine that space. And you've got a massive building with stores their purpose was probably providing an amazing shopping experience for people, and that they were the gateway to a whole bunch of great retail experiences. And what I haven't seen is them but take that to an online, where a CF becomes a gateway to a wonderful online shopping experience with content and custom development. And then I haven't seen them really reimagine the mall. They introduced some technology, some wayfinding stuff to make it easier and simpler, but we haven't seen that reimagine of the space the way we have the traditional office. They're certainly the WeWorks of the world, which reimagined the office space. Now we're reimagining the office space with a combination of virtual and live. So I think it's just like, what do you really, from a purpose standpoint, what is your purpose in the community in which you operate? Is it that people come together and that you sponsor people coming together? It's where people gather. What is it? And how can you repurpose that building to fulfill, or how can you repurpose the mall to fulfill that purpose? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. That's great.
That was a tough question. Bruce, I'm going to go to you next. You've got a question for Ron. Bruce?
There we go.
There you go.
Hey, Ron.
Hello, Bruce.
So I hope that I didn't miss this as working in the charitable side, our leading edge technology, my Commodore 64 froze. So I had to get kicked out and back in again. But I do have a question as it relates to this idea of this sort of tension or balance between showing leadership, where employees and in our case, organizations, they want to have some confidence that you as a leader have a sense as to what the near term might hold, the kinds of questions you're asking, those kinds of things. And how do you balance that with embracing the uncertainty? Because to your point, we really don't have a clue. And yet that's not very inspiring for those who work for us or those who we offer leadership to. So do you have any sort of thoughts as to how do you balance that paradox?
Yeah, I never thought I would ever say this. And I think we can use our politicians as a guide for leadership. My wife and I were out for a walk a couple of weeks ago, and we of course have a double stroller because we got the newborn and the 2-year-old. We're out for a walk in our neighborhood, and we come across people, and people are wearing masks, and everybody is social distancing. People are giving us the right of way on the sidewalk, crossing the street, doing all this. It was just this glorious moment where like everybody is doing what they're supposed to do. And we continued our walk, and we ran into Christia Freeland, who was out for a jog with her husband. And my wife and I thought that it was really important for us to not stop her and scrub her jog, but to thank her from across the street, and to wave and say, on behalf of all Canadians, we want to thank you for everything you're doing and the leadership you're showing. I never thought that I would ever be tweeting out, look to Doug Ford for examples of leadership. And that's not a political statement. It goes across every party and across the spectrum. But what have they done? Well, they've done a couple of things. One is the medical officers have been completely honest by saying, we're learning something new every single day. And as they learn it, they share that information in the most transparent way possible. They are completely vulnerable with where they're at. They admit their own mistakes in a lot of ways, and provide a positive and reassuring tone at the same time. They're not going, who the hell knows, you know? So I think what's really important for leaders is to show confidence, not in the output or the result of what is going to happen, but in the process we have put in place to deliver that. So we're saying, look, like, who knows what's going to happen, but these are the things we're doing over the next 3 to 5 weeks because, and this is why we made these decisions. And until we get new information, which, then this, and we're just going to look for the feedback that this process is working. And when we need to adapt, we will. Now, there's something else I think, and we may be beyond this stage, but I think it's really important, that first stage of chaos, for leaders to show the organization that this is not normal. And the way you do that is you roll up your sleeves and you get into the trenches with them. And by doing that for that short period of time, the message you deliver is every role within this organization is up for grabs, including mine. My responsibilities may change. Your responsibilities may change. We are all in this together. I saw a great post, the CEO of Longo's, I think it's Anthony Longo, who showed up in one of the stores stocking shelves. They didn't even know he was going to show up. He's there, and the comment from the store manager was, didn't expect to see you. What a great surprise. Your actions delivered the message way more than any message you could have sent us. And you raised the spirits of the entire store staff by being here with us. Now, we have to ensure that we don't get caught where we go into this role where we're in the trenches all day, every day. Because then, once we're in the corner, now we need to take our leadership role and start planning for the future. But initially, we need to send a message that everything is up for debate and change, and we need to be nimble to accomplish it. Does that help?
That's great. It's funny, we had Brian O'Neill, we had a members only webcast earlier this week, and that was one of the very first things he did. Similar, went into the warehouse, and it's not a permanent role. He was just there, and he was there to help and actually understand what was going on, and the fear factor too of what these individuals were faced with. And I truly believe that's one of the biggest steps in leadership, really.
Yeah, and interesting add on to that, Leon. I at the agency, my background is as a creative director, but I stepped down as CEO. I was never actively involved in the day-to-day operations, certainly from a new business and thought leadership standpoint. And through this, realized, hey, I got time. I'm not gonna get on a plane anytime soon, and I think we need some senior leadership. So I stepped back in as Chief Creative Officer and started working on a campaign which we'll deliver next week. And it was really interesting in jamming with a creative partner. And she said, am I jamming with you as a creative partner? Am I jamming with you as the new creative director? Or am I jamming with you as the founder of the agency? Because those are 3 completely different relationships. And I had to say, I'm your partner. And if you think my idea is stupid, you need to tell me. And that's how we got it, and let her take the lead on a lot of that stuff to establish, even though I had a title, that in that moment, my role was completely different.
That's right. Oh, that's great, Ron. Let's go to Yolanda. I know it's Yolanda's iPad. I know you've got a question here. Yolanda, would you like to come off mute? She may be having trouble with her iPad. Okay, I'll ask Yolanda's question. How do you manage your marketing advertising during the pandemic? It's like McDonald's two arches not touching. It's great.
Yes, so there's a couple of important things. One is that the first messaging should, it is the thing to say, this is what we believe, this is what we're doing about it, and this is how we're going to talk about it. Now, the first thing that you can do is talk about how you are changing what you do to serve the new community need. So if you're LVMH or you're Labatt's and you're saying we've changed our lines and we're now making hand sanitizer, you need to communicate that, and people want to hear that. And by the way, some research that came out a couple of weeks ago, on one hand, people say we don't want to see ads during the pandemic. On another hand, they say we are comforted by hearing from brands. So we know that people find comfort in hearing other information. So one, how are you changing what you do to serve the new community need? Secondly, if you can't do that, the heart of this campaign that we're launching next week is, I'm not very handy. I can't make a ventilator. It's not going to happen. I can't do that. So what can I do? So as a brand, what you can do is you can reinforce the really critical messages that are coming from other people. Admittedly, this is up for debate. Some people disagree with me, and they say McDonald's should not be telling us to practice social distancing. I disagree with that. I think they should. I think a brand, not from an acquisition standpoint, from a retention standpoint, your current clients who you have influence and trust with, if they're not, socially distancing, you need to use your creative assets to deliver that message, as McDonald's did, as Volkswagen did, as many, many brands did. So that's the second thing you can do. The third part that you can do, again, is not be opportunistic in how you view your messaging. This is not a time for competitive claims. This is not a time to say, the competition has these features and we have these features. What you need to focus in on is, this is the problem that exists and this is how we're solving it. Because whether we like it or not, we need Netflix. We need stuff that's not important. We need cookies and croissants and stuff that's not healthy, but we need it to keep us sane. So solve that problem for people and talk about it in a really inclusive and humble way.
Great. Thanks, Ron, for that. Sean Hamilton, you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Yes. Hi, Ron. My question is that I deal with the infrastructure, the technology infrastructure for dealerships, and they're really struggling with what's going to happen once this whole event is over. And I always say it's not the new normal, it's the abnormal. And they're competing with like Carvana and some of these other solutions, and they're already starting to embrace some of those things. But then, and it's a two-part question. The second thing is how do you then account for a black swan?
So what's interesting is, I won't say who, but I was the creative director on a global car brand for 8 years. And so but I don't like cars. I mean, I don't care about, I really don't care about cars. I know I like them, but I don't have a great passion for them. And so I'd go in, and I always believed in supporting our clients. So I would go in and I would always drive that brand. And so I'd go in and go, I'll take that one in gunmetal gray. And they'd be like, like no test drive needed. But I remember, because I wasn't passionate about cars, when I started on the business, I went to get the car to test drive the car on a Sunday. And dealerships weren't open on a Sunday. And I went and I said to the sales, when I went back the next week, I said, how come you don't open on a Sunday? That is the best day to test drive a car from a consumer standpoint. And the salesperson said, we're not open on Sunday. If they ever brought that in, I'd quit. I think we're going to see massive changes in how dealerships attract customers and sell the product. And it is because dealerships were baked in legacy, in precedence of what has occurred in the past. No surprise in that many dealerships, in my experience, were handed down from parents to children. And so it was even those behaviors, I mean, they grew up with as kids, was baked into that model. And so, yeah, they're going to need to completely, take a look at that. And how do you deal with the black swan coming in that you never saw coming? It's to take that fresh look at what you deliver and how you deliver it and what the consumer really needs. Because let's be frank and honest, the car buying experience for most people has sucked for years. For years. And we talked about what Saturn brought to the space and how different and unique it was. And then kind of GM acquired them, or GM kind of brought that more inside General Motors instead of treating it like a concept car. And in my opinion, completely screwed it up. But that consumer model was something that was fresh and needed. So that's what I think that's going to occur. And that may need a change from how the OEMs deal with the dealers and what that model is, what that corporate structure is, whether you need more corporate owned stores and less franchisees. You maybe need to look at the compensation structures of how you're paying your salespeople. No surprise, they've been on commission. So all those things are up for grab. One other thing, quickly, I don't remember if I shared this with you when we were live or not, but that is an approach. Car manufacturing is an approach for how you can deal with these new services that you may offer. In one way, what you currently deliver is on the assembly line. Everybody knows exactly what to do. They know exactly what their job is. You've sucked out, hopefully, all the inefficiencies. And if everybody puts their head down, does their job, they pass it on to the next person, you guarantee quality and product and margin at the end every single time. It's repeatable behavior. Now, in my business, we say you kill it and bill it. Kill it and bill it. Put your head down, do your job, pass it off, get it out. That's the assembly line. But don't forget, when the car folks want to innovate, they create a concept car. The concept car is off the assembly line. It is over here. There's no hope that it's ever going to go into production. They do it to do it. And they do it with a small, nimble team who are outside of the bureaucracy of the corporate organization. And they do it to do it. And then they look and they go, oh, this gas cap, that can work. And they pull that and they pull it in and they bring it into the assembly line. So that can still occur. It's just that the time frame has been drastically reduced, that we need to increase the speed of developing those concept cars a lot faster. I hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Ron, on that. It's interesting, dealership, because I know a few of the dealers as well, and that industry has already been going through massive transformation. A lot of the old dealers are selling their businesses. You see all the real estate changing over or big developments happening. This is just going to basically accelerate that incredibly fast. We've got time for, I think, one more question. Teresa, I know you're online there. You want to come out? And there you go.
Yeah, so my second question was already kind of answered, so we don't have to do that one. But, just thinking in terms of some of what you've talked about in your book and the addresses you've given, right now you've got some CEOs, and I come from a company that's doing that, where they're guaranteeing our jobs, right? So there's not going to be any layoffs due to this situation, doing the stress testing, which is, it's great stability. Obviously government is looking to companies to have that leadership to not, contribute to the challenges. But at the same time, you're also talking about, you may need to relook at everything you do, pivot how you do it, which ultimately means your workforce may not be the same, or you might not have the same needs. So how do you find that balance? You talk about purpose and that leadership, but you could have, and I don't know if it's 6 months, 1 year, 2 years from now, where you can't make those same commitments, or how do you not break that commitment and that reputation?
There's a couple of things. One is that what are you communicating to? And and I can totally appreciate that not everybody on this call can guarantee jobs. I mean, owner-operator business, maybe you just don't. It's not financially available for you to do that. And so what we communicated to our organization was, we're here to save as many jobs as possible. And we're here to save as many jobs as possible through this so that we can keep everybody healthy and engaged. And quite frankly, we had to dismiss a couple of people who we didn't feel were going to help contribute to saving as many jobs as possible. And so we had to recalibrate people for the greater good. That was the first thing. The second thing was that we showed, I think, to the Anthony Longo, is like, hey, I'm writing copy, I'm writing headlines now. So my job is changing. That's a message to say that your job might change. And when we had some opportunities for people, we went to them with those opportunities to say, would you like to add this responsibility? And this is why we think you're really important for this. Here's how you can help us all out. So we were offered opportunities to people, but justified why they were the right person to do it. I will also very quickly answer your second question, which is around every ad is sounding the same. And I think it's because it goes beyond advertising. There was actually a parody ad that came out, which of all the COVID ads that were out there, that we're using like a really similar piano track. Like we all can write the spot and the script, right? You know, open on the music that is a soft piano track. A cheap version of a Donald Sutherland voice comes in and says, we're all in this together. These times are unprecedented, but we'll get through it as a family, right? And people are like, really? Screw you. Because I got, my life is a total upheaval over here, and we're not all in it together. So you have to consciously say, we're not going to use that script. First choice, this is the script. I use unprecedented. We're in it together. We're a family. Second choice, don't use that. The campaign that we're launching next week, which is for Media Smart, which is around misinformation, the dangers of misinformation around COVID-19. I put my hand up and I said, I think we need a smile. I think we need a joke somewhere in a respectful, non-tone deaf way. We need that. We need bright colors in this. We need great, funky animation. Why? Because everything else is gray and dark and gloomy and scripted. Let's not do that. And I think that's how, when you do that, you not only cut through, I think you read the room in an appropriate way. I hope that answered both of your questions.
Well, Ron, that was a great way to actually end today on that positive note. And it's true, looking out optimistically, this time will be a blip in our future in a year's time. So Ron, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your thoughts and your presentation. I know you mentioned your presentation will be available to those that ask for it. So we have everybody who was in attendance today. So we should be able to send that out along with our thank you today. Include sort of and finalize. So if you're interested in our Way Forward live webcasts, make sure to visit us at poleadership.com. You'll find a number of recorded past webcasts that we've done with Professor Janice Stein. We've had Rosabeth Cantor, we've had Michael Beer, and we've had a number of our members actually present as well, whether it be around rent or around mental challenges, really just trying to have dialogues and to help you all through some of the challenges and opportunities that you're faced with today. Next week, we have Goldie Hyder, the CEO of the Canadian Business Council. For those that don't know the Canadian Business Council, they're a leadership group that really represents some of the top TSX companies out there, the traded publicly companies. They act both as a lobbying force as well as a business force. So I'll be interviewing Goldie for an hour next Friday if you'd like to join us. Anyway, wishing you all a fantastic rest of the day, a great long weekend. Yes, it is a long weekend. I know many of you forget, but Monday will be a holiday. And that concludes our session for today. Thank you again.